involves API decorators, methods, calling child methods, and everything else. But first, I will begin with my introduction. I'll share my slide by. I'll just begin by sharing my introduction. So I've been working in this Salesforce SQL environment for 3 years at Cloud Junction Advisors. I'm 5 times Salesforce certified, and I've worked on Aura components. I've worked on LWC, but it's been 1.5 years that I've been working on LWC. All right, so I mean, here a lot of folks have already worked on VF pages and Aura component. So in my presentation, I will also describe that how some things are different than, how Aura component is different from LWC. And for example, declaring an attribute, accessing it from in JavaScript and HTML, how you can do it and how it is different from Aura component. So I'll be speaking in English, but if anyone, if the majority of the audience wants me to, speak in either Hindi or Urdu, I can switch. All right. So, so let's begin. So I'll share the table of contents. So first, I will define basic DOM and shadow DOM. What is DOM and shadow DOM? And then the most important part of LWC, which is the track and API properties that you declare. What is the usage? What is the idea behind it? How you can use it? And what's the purpose of it? All right. And parent to child communication. So parent to child communication, there are multiple scenarios of web pages where you cannot bind everything into a single component. So you establish a parent component, and that component, like a container component, and you establish some child components to store that information into the parent component. And these child components gets visible when you allow them from parent component. So there are some functions, methods that are written in child component. So I'll show you that how you can invoke or trigger child properties and child methods. All right, and then this is also a basic. The callback methods that LWC uses. For example, you in Aura component, you have init. In LWC, you have a replacement called as connected callback, and there's some extra layers in Lightning Web component, the callbacks that says rendered callback, disconnected callback. I'll also demonstrate that as well. And lastly, the component lifecycle. And then we'll have a Q&A session. So I'll begin by DOM and shadow DOM. So for example, whenever we insert, for example, we have normally in our architecture, we have a server and we have a functionality to get the response from the server. Does the server sends the response to the web browser? It understands it and present it in an understandable format. The response that we get will be in HTML. All right. So for whatever, for example, if you open up your inspect element and you see there are this HTML written, that's a user understandable object that says all the information that have all the information that is being passed from the server. All right. So under that, whenever you embed a Lightning web component on a web page, it's open to enable as outside of Salesforce. For example, even if you use it in Salesforce, you'll see that in the inspect element, you'll see that there is some, for example, if you draw, there's a component called text calculation. And if you dropped it on your home page, so you'll see that there's a tag that says on the whole body that covers the component, which would be this, the component and the component's name. See text calculation, and under that would be called, your whole component will be, will be the body of the component will be called shadow DOM, right? And under your component, as Hamza must have described in the first session, that the first when you declare all of your HTML under a template tag in Oracle in LWC component, And under that template tag, that is, I mean, the template tag itself is called shadow root, and everything besides the shadow DOM is under shadow tree. I mean, they can be this template tag, there can be some other child components, and you can have anything like that. All right. So the shadow DOM is something that you embed, for example, in your web page, and the documentary is that how whatever you are, whatever the HTML the browser is sending the information into a user understandable language. All right. So that's all about shadow DOM and DOM that we have. All right. So what is decorators? I mean, decorators and API. These are the two main methods in two main types of properties in LWC we use. So whenever you start building your Lightning Web Components, to store the data, to retrieve the data. To access the data and to just show it in your HTML into your HTML file, you'll use track and API format. So, but what is how you can store it? I'll also demonstrate that. So, in simpler term, it's a private reactive property. The main thing is that it stores this property can hold information. For example, you can declare anything under this property, but this is private. So what does it mean by private? So for example, in VS Code, if you create a new Lightning Web component and you have defined a track property, all right? So in your JavaScript file, you have defined a property. So after defining the property, you used the property name with the name of track. All right. So the limitation of track is that it's like your Apex private method. All right. So you cannot access that same property into another component. This is not global. You cannot use it into another component. This is a private property that is restrictive to your own single component. All right. So as of after Spring 2020, it was not required to annotate add track, but for objects and arrays, you have to use the add track. So what do I mean from all this? I'll switch to VS Code and create a new Lightning Web component. All right. So let's see. So here I've created a Lightning Web component, and let's just create a Lightning card. So let's say I have a Lightning card here, and in this card, I have a title. I have a hard-coded title that says "Hello." All right. So, but I want to make it dynamic. For example, I want to declare this in JavaScript, and so for what I'll do is that when I go to into the JavaScript file of LWC, I'll declare a property that says title, and I'll write welcome LWC. All right. So it's giving him an error. So you'll have to, in this document library, you'll also have to import this property. So I'll just add the track element. So for example, I have added track here, and this I have declared a property named as title. So I can use this same property in anywhere of this HTML file. All right. So whatever I store. So not only that static information I can use, I will use this same parameters, this same terminology to store the Apex, the server information. For example, in my component, I want to get all the context. So I can declare a context property here, and I can declare a context property here and get all the information from Salesforce with context information to this variable in this property and expose it into this HTML file. So all my context will be visible. So this is something which we will discuss in next sessions while when we are working in when we are working with Salesforce data. But as of now, we are doing the basics. So for example, I have defined a static value title, welcome to LWC. So I can use this same property by defining the title here. Right, so I have defined a lightning card. This is a standard lightning card of SLDS, and there's a title property that has the same information. So I'll deploy this in my org. Another thing is that whenever you define, whenever, for example, if I just want to drag and drop this component into my Salesforce homepage, the component is demo LWC component. So there are various components visible here, but you cannot see this demo LWC component here. So in the component structure, I mean the bundle, just like you have multiple files in Aura component bundle, you have three files, and the fourth file of CSS you can create by yourself. But by default, when you create the component, there are three files that have been created. One is HTML, one is JS, and one is meta file. So in this meta file, you declare where the component should be visible. So I'll just add some tags to, define that it can be visible on homepage, and all right, so it will be visible on the app page. I can also make it visible on the home page. And if you want to make it visible on the record page, you can also add another element that says record page. Right. All right, so my component has been deployed. I'll refresh to see that if it's coming in the app builder. So here it is. So you can see that I've created a component, added a card, and just defined the meta file that where it should be located. So I'll just save it, go back, and see that the title is not hard-coded in HTML. It is coming from the track property. So this is how you can define to store information in your track property and make it visible to the HTML. All right. So I can change I can change the message, or I can define some logics into it, that what should be the message. So this is how you can use the title, the track property. So this, as I earlier said, that this does not only hold the static information, for example, string, it can also hold information like arrays and objects. So for example, if I create an array, person information, and here I will define areas, for example, name, title should be. So this is my object. I mean, you can see that I have defined multiple information here. So this is not a single information that I have contained into this track property. So I can access it by using, I mean, for example, do in the title, for example, I can, for example, let's create another lightning card. So in this card, I can define John's age. In the footer tag, I can define John's age. So whatever the information, person information dot. It's a hard coded tag as well. So in that, using the dot annotation, you can access the elements in the objects and arrays. All right. So I've deployed this. So you can see that you can print multiple information that you declared in your track variable. All right. So that's all about some basic understanding of how track will be utilized in your Lightning Web Components. And moving forward, in our next sessions, we will describe that how you can use Apex controller. For example, you are uh, you are sending some info, you are getting some information from your database, for example, in account or contact information, and that how you can use store that information that you are getting from your server. All right. So this is we will discuss in next sessions. So that's all about the track as of now. Is there any question? Feel free to ask, and I'll also jump on AI decorator. All right. But if you have any question regarding track, please let me know about it. Hamza, can you share some questions if they have?
Right now, I cannot see anyone has asked any question, so you could.
All right. All right. All right. So I can continue. I think that's all about track. So one thing I forgot to mention is that uh, if you are declaring a single type of string or anything, not if the information that you're storing is not based on arrays and objects, you can remove this track tag. It's not necessary, right? So if I just save it and deploy it, it will also work, right? So, but for arrays and objects, it's still required. So that's all about track, and now we will jump on to decorators, which is API. So decorators, I mean, please ignore this image. This is from another slide. So I'll just remove it. All right. So I mean, this property, I mean, the track and API both do the same kind of work, that holding information, these properties, but the only difference is the scope. All right. So the scope. So the track variable or the track property has private scope, but the API property has, if you have a parent and child component. All right. So there are two types of, and one is a child component, and that you have a child component. So under that child component, you have some property that is defined, that is blank, and you don't want your same child component to set any value in the child parent component to send some information, to send the property value from the parent component, not the child component. Child component, there will be only a variable, the property declared, but the value assigned the value assignment will be coming from the parent component. So this is how you can use the API. You can use add API tag decorator in order to set the value not from the private component itself, but from other component, the parent component. All right. Uh, as you can see, to expose a public property, decorate a public properties can public properties API for a component. All right. So I'll just begin by creating that says I'll create parent and child component. Right. So this is a so under this component, there's nothing in this component. This is blank, and I have whatever the information is in this component will be coming from the child component. So I'll create a child component as well, and let me create a child component and add it into this parent. So how you can do that? So for example, if you created a parent component, now you'll create a child component. I have two components here. In this child component, I'll add some information. So for example, I'll also add the card as well. And in this child component, I'll declare an API property that says message. Right. So the message should be visible into this message. So I'll also have to import this API property. Get errors. So you can see that the message is blank. All right. And also reference this message into this. Right. So you can see that this initially when when there is no, I mean, there's no value assigned to this message property. So whatever there's no text in the footer section. So the second step would be that I will add this component into my parent. So I have a parent component. I can just declare this LWC child, and that's it. So I mean, as you can see, I have defined that this parent component should entail. But what if I want to pass some information in child component? So I have declared the child component, but I want to pass the message from child component. All right. So let's just here message. So this message. Right. So how I can use this information? Right. Here it is. So what's the name of the child? We will define what's the name in the child component. So what the variable name in child component is message. So we will declare this, and we will define what information from where it should get the value, and we will define what we have described in this parent component, right? And deploy it. All right. So first I'll have to deploy this child. And in this meta file, define it's and oh, sorry, I have declared the added the wrong component. No, the component is fine. There's some issue. Sedge, think I'm having some difficulty in the syntax. Yeah, here you can see. So this information, as you can see, this message, what is being printed here, that is being defined in this child component is initially blank, right? So you can see that it was I did not assign any message into this child component. And this section here, this footer, this section whole, this lightning card is from child component. So I have declared nothing into this footer message. But what I have done is that I have uh, I have defined a message into another component that is a parent, and how I and just the message into this JS file. All right. And how you can just map these messages. For example, you define your child component here, and in that child component you have this variable that is of this API property uh, that is of child. And how you can map is that is equals to, and that you define, or whatever you can also define hard code message, and whatever you can define anything. So I have defined the message from the uh, parent component to the child component. All right, so this is how you can do it. Moving on, this is how you can access values from child component and assign it into a parent component. But what about if you jump on another method that says call method on child component, right? So I mean, accessing values and assigning it from parent component is fine. What if there's some function of JavaScript in your child component and you want to invoke that same function into your child component by using a parent component? All right. So I'll begin by using an example. So I mean, I'll also write code here. So let's say that I have a child here. I have a child here. I'll create a lightning card, and I can use the checkbox. I can use checkbox, yes. And so, and, and remove the information. So checked is equals to check. As you can see, that initially the checkbox is false. It's marked as false. So sorry, I did not mark it as false. So initially the checkbox is false. And what I want to do is that I want to create a function that will automatically select this checkbox as true. And what's visible initially was my checkbox will be set as false. But I want to create a function that when this function is being invoked, the checkbox should be checked, all right, as true. So for example, I will create a function here. So the main important thing about is that it will be declared, it will be invoked from your parent component, all right. So you will also use add API here, and you will use uh, invoke checkbox, and under here you will set this value to true. So one thing to note is that whenever you are using track property or API property, and you are using it into your JavaScript functions, for example, calling Apex and everything else, you cannot just use checkbox this and I mean, you can not use just checkbox and just assign the variable. You have to write this dot in order to, let the component know that it is from the properties file, right? So I'll declare it as true. And what I'll do, this function is, I have written this function, and this I will invoke this function from my parent component. All right. So in this parent component, I will have, I will have a, I will have a button here as well. So for example, there's a button. child method, and there will be a button here. So brand the handle click. All right, so in this handle click method, I'll declare a method here. This handle click, what it will do, so in this handle click, let me also make it visible for the value to be true. All right. So in this handle click method, how I can use this child function. So these are standard DOM APIs that you can use. So what you must have heard the template.query selector. So you can use this information to get information of your child component and even in your child components methods and values. So I'll use this by a query selector. So here I will define my component name. So my component name is demo LWC child. And then I can I have defined I've gotten the demo LWC child the child component, and I want to access the method name, right? So how I can use the the method name. Here it is. So let's deploy this as well. So what I've done is that initially when the component loads, the checkbox will be set as false. But when I trigger a button, when I click a button on the parent component, it should a function in the child component to make the value as true, right? So here's the checkbox. Sorry about the layout. All right, so it's not being called. Let me take a look into this. And all right, so as you can see that there are no parameters in this component. So what I'll do is that I forgot to define that this will not have any parameter. So it is. So I'm not sending any information. I'm just invoking the child function. So this is why this is blank. Right. All right, so I'm having some. I get in trouble with the syntax, so I'm copying it. So let's see that what's the problem. So this should also be come under this syntax, and rest is fine. Now let's deploy it. All right. Right. So that's also could be the problem. Take a last turn. Last try, and we'll just jump onto another section. We'll see what's happening here. Yeah, here it finally works. Sorry about the time. So as you can see, if I refresh this page, initially the child component's value is false. So I have a button in my parent component that says when you click this child components property of this child components input of checkbox should be marked as true. All right. So when I click it, you can see that it is being changing, and it is being changing to change via parent. All right. So for example, if you want to show some static information, for example, change via parent, message from parent, so you can just define some additional parameters. For example, you can define some string tags. For example, you can define value, and under this and under this value you can also append after your checkbox label, you can append the information to your checkbox label, and this value is also being assigned from the parent as well. So instead of using it instead of using the blank function, you can assign the value here. All right, so this is how you can use multiple parameters to send the information from parent component to child component using query selector. All right, so that's all about how you can how you can use this parent to child communication. You can assign uh, child function using the parent component. So if anyone, I know there must be a lot of questions, but I hope I can address some. So before we jump on to the next section, do we have any question about all of this calling methods and everything else? So, can you chime in? All right, Hamza, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So Hamza, should we take the questions in the last part?
Yeah, let's do that. Actually, I think that there are only a couple of
If
questions
there are a
asked.
few questions.
Yes, but most of them have been answered by Aditya. Thank you so much for that. Um, Please feel free to post your questions on a Q&A tab if you see that, and also you can do it on a chat as well. So
All right.
I I think
So
don't think we have many more questions. So I'll ping you when we have.
all right, sure. So this is all about using parent to child communication. In our later sessions, we will also describe how you can send information from your child component to your parent component using events, right? And this is all about the static information that we have done, but we will also use how to do parent and child communication using Salesforce data, all right? And next we have connected callback. So the connected callback, so it is the most commonly used callback method in LWC. Almost every LWC has it. So what it does is that whenever the component, for example, if I refresh this page, the DOM is being inserted again. All right, so the DOM is being inserted at the time of the DOM that is being inserted, the connected callback runs. So you can manipulate your data, you can manipulate your properties, you can manipulate anything into your connected callback method. It's like a method that runs when the page loads and when the DOM is inserted. Right, so whenever you refresh a page, what value should come up, you can insert, you can use you can use connected callback for that, and it flows from parent to child. Right, so then whenever you have two types of components, it will be first triggered on the child, first parent component, and child component if they have the connected callback methods. All right, so there can be multiple things that can be used in connected. You can assign variables. For example, you have, I've been defining under this tag initially when the in the component file, but in the connected callback, or I can also its messages. All right, so for example, let's have a use case. For example, you have a you want to create, you have a requirement of creating an LWC component. Right, so in this LWC component, you have, in this LWC component, you want to create two sections. So one section would be for the top two tiers, or top tier clients, and the second section of the normal clients. All right, so you are getting information from your server of all types of clients you have, but in your JavaScript library and you want to differentiate those. So in your connected callback, you will I mean,
Odd, are you there? Odd, we can't hear you.
to your hit a call out to your server and run to your. Hello, Hamza, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
All right. Sorry, I was lost. Let me know when my screen is visible. Yeah, I think it's visible now. So, my voice fine now, Hamza? Right. So I was just discussing about the use cases of connected callback. So for example, you have a Lightning component that shows all of your opportunities in your homepage. All right. That shows all of your opportunities name with their revenue, with their amount on your homepage. All right. So what you can see, what you can do is that whenever the user logs in, and they land onto this page. So initially it is being refreshed. So when it is being refreshed, or when you log in to see the home page, the DOM is inserted, and under that method, the connected callback runs. So the connected callback will run, and it will get all the opportunities from your Salesforce server. And what it will do is that it will get the information into your LWC file, and you can use the track property to store that information and use it in HTML to show the data. So as of now, I will not use Salesforce data because I will share the example of using this connected callback with Salesforce data in next session. But what I'll do is that, for example, I have a I have a I have a LWC component, the first one that I have created. Uh, Demo LWC component, right? So this is the one. So this is the one that I have created, and you can see this is this has multiple information. So what I'll do is that add a connected callback method, and I will not define this information here. I will not assign this variable of track here. I will assign it into the connected callback. All right. So initially, I'll just write connected callback, and this dot title is equals to. I will also print a log here, and so I will say title in connected callback. Remember to use this dot, and just remove some components so that does not create any issues. So as you can see, the initial value was welcome to LWC. All right. So in connected callback, you can see that the value has been changed. All right. This will be as connected. This will be as in connected callback. All right. So you can see. So as soon as this page gets loaded, if I open the developer console and block everything, and when I refresh it, the DOM is being inserted, and that is when the connected callback is being running. And you can see that under this method of this callback method of connected callback, I get my message that says because it has been triggered when I refresh the page. All right. So that at that time, the DOM was inserted and this method ran. So people normally developers, we as developers make many manipulations into the component using this connected callback. So I mean, initially there are multiple requirements that when the page loads, and initially the values in the component should reflect it that way. So we use connected callback to modify the data and show it into the HTML format. But it's similar to your Aura init method. Uh, that also works on the on when the DOM is being inserted on the page. All right. So you might be wondering that what if I want to print this title? What was the initial value of the title? You cannot do that because DOM is the first phase. Whatever is being assigned is in the I mean, whatever the value is being in the DOM in the component directory can come up under this connected callback method. So you cannot have this. I mean, you cannot just define this dot title and just gets the initial value printed here, right? So that is how you can do it, and you can just before this, or you can just use this console.log and use the title previously. That what was the title that was previous title, what was the previous title. All right, so you can just define it here. That way you can use connected callback. The main I mean, I think it's pretty useless. It sounds pretty useless, but it's the most important method in our uh, LWC structure. So when we start using Salesforce data into LWC in our next sessions, I'll come up with proper examples that how you can use manipulate Salesforce data and show it into the component using this connected callback. All right. So you can define multiple logics into this connected callback. I hope everyone understands this connected callback method. And the another thing is rendered callback. All right. So as you can see, connected callback run when the page loads, when the DOM is inserted. So there is another thing that is called rendered callback, right? So what is rendered callback? So rendered callback is a method. I mean, it's some for example, whenever anything gets rendered after the connected callback ran, it assigns some properties. It's doing whatever it can. But rendered callback is something like uh, due to any change or anything that is being rendered in your component, the method should run. What should be run? All right. So that only that way we use rendered callback. It's the most. I mean, it is really used method in LWC because we don't have such much scenarios of using rendered callback. We mostly use connected callback. So let me make a example. I'm making an example here. So for example, there's an demo LWC component here, and let's have an input field here, right? Uh, input, and the value should be value is equals to name, and under this I will define the name here. And when I change the value, it should also, I mean, it should also track the change element. So I'll just also write on change, handle change. All right. So this handle change, I will create a method here. So, so this name would be uh, event dot target dot value, right? And I will also here right, so I will also use the rendered callback. So whenever the main purpose of writing this code is that the main purpose of writing this code is that for example, you have the input field here that says type your name, and whenever it is being changing the component render itself. So for example, you have an input field here and you just type your information here. All right. But whenever you're typing, whenever you are changing the value, the component is rendering. All right. So the component is rendering, and it's this rendered callback method. If it is being written onto into this component file, it gets changed. All right. So it gets triggered. So whenever you are typing a single keyword, this method is being called, and that will create an infinite loop. So for example, any changes in the component will trigger this rendered callback, and this will create some issues. So So I'll have, so here it is. All right. There's some issue with the code. Sorry, there's some mistake here. Add events. So log. All right. So you can see, for example, the the page in its the page is still, I'm not doing anything, but as soon as I modify anything, for example, modify any input, anything, click on any button, the rendered callback is being called. All right, so that's not a good practice to use rendered callback this way. All right, so for example, it is being it's used in use cases where you need to load static resources from your Salesforce org. All right, and when you have a dependent information, for example, if you want to show the account banner, then you can use rendered callback, and that will only use the account banner when the page loads, or either the contact or opportunity banner. Initially it's just a one-time transaction, but if you do not make it restrictive, which I'll do that in this demo. But if you do not make it restrictive, whatever you are rendering into this component, it will invoke this rendered callback method. All right, and that will create an infinite loop. All right, so even if I just enter a key here, I mean, it will execute this rendered callback method, and that will slow down the performance of the component and everything else. And this gets, I mean, if you complicate the logic, if you extend the code into this method, I mean, it can create a lot of issues. So how I can overcome that? All right. So I can overcome that by using a variable, for example. I can use I can use a variable here, that the initial value of the variable will be true. All right. The initial value of the value of the variable will be true. And under that, I will go into this in a rendered callback method, and I will define a specific condition that if rendered is true, only then it should execute it. All right. And once it performs its information, it performs its function, it should set the checkbox as false. So across the component's lifecycle, it will remain as false. And if you are doing some changes into the component, this will not be triggered. All right. So let's make it false. I have defined a condition that it is, if it is true, when the page loads, if it's true, print this method. and then make it to false so that it does not create an infinite loop and gets running again and again. And initially I've set the value as true, but when the function first time runs, it will make the value as false. So I'll deploy it. And as you can see, initially the rendered callback when the page load is work because the component rendered itself after connected callback. And if I type anything here, it's running. All right, so oh sorry, should make this false here. Should come under this method. You can see that initially when the page loads, the rendered callback method ran when the component was rendering. We're using the connected callback, but after that, you can see that it ran first time, and in this when it ran, it set the value after it, finishing its information. For example, printing the information here, it set the value to false, and as you can see, if I change anything, the component renders itself, but the rendered callback method is not being executed. So the sales recommended approach to avoid infinite loops using rendered callback is that you use a variable, you use a property here that you can define boolean into that and just assign value that whether it should run or it should not run. All right, so that's all about the rendered callback. But initially it's being, I mean, as I said, there are very few use cases to use rendered callback. uh, I mean, it's basically used to, I mean, load some static resources, labels, and anything else. I mean, whatever you can use depending on your use case. But the main use case is that of using rendered callback is that whenever a client or anyone else wants to render information based on the component, based on the fact that the components is finished uploading or rendering, you can use this rendered callback method. All right, so that's all about the rendered callback method. So this was here. So I mean, it's a recommended approach. For example, in this connected callback, you can see that I have defined the property. I have changed the property into this. The approach, you can do that. All right, but as a best practice and to avoid problems, Salesforce. I mean, Salesforce authorizes to not use variable assignments into rendered callback. All right, this is not something you should do into the rendered callback, and it flows from parent to child component. So remember, we had a field of input of checkbox. So whenever it is being checking the component, the rendering structure will flow from child to parent. All right, so that's how you do it. So this is, I mean, the main thing to understand is that it is used to perform logic after the component has finished rendering phase. Finished rendering phase means that whatever you are modifying, for example, even if changing the input value, that is finished rendering now, and it should call the method now. All right, that's it about the component life cycle. First I have discussed the connected callback, and now I have discussed the rendered callback. So the last thing is disconnected callback. So I mean, it's also a really used method, callback method, but you should know about it. So this is something in this whenever you want to remove your component from your DOM, document object model, you want to remove the page. For example, I had parent and child component here on my directory, and I wanted to make a functionality that based on the checkbox, the component disappears from the DOM. It should wipe out all the properties that had that the child has, everything. I mean, the parent, although the tag will be there in the actual component, but it should be removed from this DOM. All right. So how you can do that? So I found a very great example here. So for example, you can see that there's a component app that is a parent component, and there's some tags here: disconnected, callback, demo, and here you have a lightning checkbox. And in this checkbox, you can see that there's a handle change method on, and what's happening onto that handle change method. So in this, first we will see that at what is in the JS file. So you can see they have declared a variable. They have declared a variable to show child initially as true. So whenever the page loads, the value is true, and this child will be visible. But as you can see, child component was added to when the child component was added to the parent component, they have made a condition here that only if show child is true, then the document then the this whole child component should be visible to the users. All right. But if it is unchecked, it should not show this child component, this checkbox, this text box. All right. It should not if this checkbox is false, it should not show this checkbox. So for example, if I just click on this checkbox, you can see that the component child component disappears. All right. And when I click it again, it appears again. So when I click it, it is being removed from the DOM. All right. So we have modified the code in a way that when it is from parent component, that when is unchecked, it should remove this child component. All right. So it is being removed from the child component, and then only I can also trigger when this checkbox is hit and the component is being gone. You can invoke disconnected callback. So you can see in the child component, we have whenever this checkbox is being set to false, this method is being run. So this checkbox will make the component disappear, and ultimately it will call disconnected callback, because based on this functionality that we have built on the parent, it is being removed from the DOM. And when the component is being removed from the DOM, use connected callback. So you can for example, you have multiple tabs and you want to you have a multiple tab, you have a container component LWC, and there are four or five tabs here, and you want to remove one tab. So there's a minus sign, click here, and you can just click on that, and under that you will remove you have assigned the value to false, and this child component will be removed from your components directory. And when the tab is being removed, you can perform any logic that says, hey, for example, a confirmation that yes, the disconnected callback has been ran, and you no longer can see the child component. All right. So you can perform the main the purpose of this callback method is to, I mean, allow you to apply some functions and logics when the child component is being removed from your DOM. So that's only the use case. So I can share the link of all the code I have written here, and this repository, I mean, this component directory that was written by Rahul. So that's a very great example. So that's why I used it. So that is how you can use all the types of callbacks. For example, the connected callback, rendered callback, and disconnected callback. Lastly, this is generic and covering all of the things that we have covered. So when the page loads, I mean, the component gets its request, and the constructor is called, and if it has child components, as you can see that the rendered callback flows from child to parent. right? But if they do not have child components, I mean the DOM is being inserted, the shadow DOM, and the parent components, the connected callback is run, it will run. You can assign some attributes, you can perform logic, you can build if conditions, you can assign, you can create objects, you can create arrays into this connected callback. And then the ROM, and whenever the user modify any information onto the component, you can, yeah, the DOM rendered method is being run, and then whenever the rendered property and rendered callback is being run, uh, this will flow to parent. For example, the rendered callback method will was in a child method, and it will run to parent component, and the parent removed from DOM. It means that using the parent component, the component has been removed from the DOM, and then whenever the component is being removed from the DOM, it should trigger the native disconnected callback method here, right? If you have it in your JavaScript file. So in this JavaScript file, whenever, if you have written this method, so whenever the DOM is being removed, uh, so it will trigger this method. And lastly, that's it. That shows the hierarchy, that how the DOM is being removed from the child method, and triggered from the parent method. So that's all about I mean, the basics of LWC, where we have discussed multiple scenarios and use cases and how you can use it. But the main thing is how you can use Salesforce data using this tools, how you can modify Salesforce database, and how you can display information that is residing in your objects. So we will cover those things in the later sessions. But if you have any questions, please ask, and I'll happy to assist. Right? So Hamza, can sign.
Great. Thank you so much. Question and answer session. I wanted to go back to the slide. Can you go back to the second last slide? Okay. I think he is not.
Hello.
Right. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Sorry, I'm having
No, no
some
worries. Can you
issues.
go back to the second last slide? I want to show them the theme that
Yeah,
what our upcoming sessions.
yeah. So let me just present it. So in our in our next session, we will use component communication using events.
Your
So
screen is not visible.
all right, all right. Let me know when it's visible. I was only sharing my video. Is it visible now?
Yes, it's visible
All
now.
right. So in our next session, in our third session, which is scheduled for January 15, so we will use component communication using events. So when events are used, so we discussed about how we can communicate between parent to child. All right. So in order to communicate between child to parent, we use events. And how we can use events, what is the tool that we use, and what's the code, and what's the logic, and what's the use case. We will describe that in our next session. After that, we have Salesforce data, working with Salesforce data, including LDS. So Salesforce data is that what I've been kept saying is that there will be multiple scenarios that will involve the Salesforce objects and its information, that how we can modify it using Salesforce LWC. LWC component, all right? And then last session would be navigation services. For example, you have various navigation services for our component that navigate to the record, to the record page, to the home page. So we have this inbuilt navigation services in LWC that are far better and easy to use than in Aura. So how we can use navigation services, for example, there's a component that says create account that has fields of account name, industry, email, and everything else. And on that save button, when the record is being created, I want to redirect the user to the same created record. I can use LWC navigation service. How we can use that? We will do that into in our fifth session. All right. So that's it about all of this. Hamza, you can continue.
Sure, thanks. There's a question from user that how long a rendered callback take time to render a complex UI?
So it depends upon your, I mean, it depends upon your what you are pulling into rendered callback. If you are getting static resources that have lots of files and data, it can take some time. So you'll have to add logic to make the component faster or in a user friendly way. But depends on your data, that what you depend on your functions and your assignments, that what you are doing. The the more the code is, the more the values you are getting and storing and processing in your rendered callback method, the more time it takes.
Great. I hope that answers the question. I can see that there are a couple of questions asked by Aditya on a tab. Suppose I make,
So
yeah, if
yeah.
you could read on the
All
Q&A
right.
tab.
So the next question is that what level of deep structured track property can aware about changes? So that's a good question. So I've said that track property is a private property. It can only track changes into your private LWC. For example, this whole LWC can contain the information of track elements. For example, if you can use this information, its value, across anywhere into the component HTML file or anywhere else. But if you want to use it besides your actual component, you can use the API property, right? So you can use it in your, I mean, as you can see that I have declared a function and I'm using the same private property here. So it can go any levels if it is within the component boundary. Yeah, yeah, that's how I have done it. For example, as you can see that this person information is a nested object, and this is something that I have. So I have multiple information to this, so I can iterate over this track variable, track property, and even I can just using that dot annotation, I could go further levels deep into this property. And using this, I can also initiate loops and access the information that holds the values of this property, right? um I did
Under
not
the Q&A tab also.
so get some scenarios where the value of this track element is not being tracked, but I don't find it if